Hey, welcome back to part 2 of my series for building a home server. In this one, we're going to get into something a little more exciting. We're going to be getting the heatsink put on, discussing about the orientation of the fans and where they go, and start working on getting wire management done with the power supply and start wiring in all of the hard drives. So stay tuned. Okay, so for our first section, we'll talk about installing some fans. As I'm pointing out in the video, I don't actually have the hardware to install them right now. I had ordered them and I was waiting for them to be delivered. So just talking about the placement here, that is 120 mil that I'll have back there that will suck the hot air out the back. I was also joking about the idea of flipping it around to suck in cool air from the back as well. This is a 140 millimeter fan that I decided to place up on the top that will extract hot air out of the top of the case. So that way, because hot air rises, right? So as the system would heat up, I would put the 240 millimeter fans up on top and extract the air straight out the top. But I had decided to use the front intake and use that as cool air, and as the heat rises, just have it extracted up and out the back. Okay, and as for this section, we're going to be using the good old isopropyl alcohol again to clean the CPU up on this. When the heatsink was removed the first time, it was just pulled apart, stored as is. So we have a little bit of cleaning we're going to have to do before we reapply some new thermal paste and get the new heatsink applied back on it. What I did is just grabbed a Q-tip, dipped it in there, and just used the end of the Q-tip and give it a good little scrub. You may have to do this a couple of times because you want to make sure to get all of the old thermal paste off of the CPU, as much as you can get off. So as you can see here, you can actually really see it coming off right here. You got the first initial. You can still see a little bit of crap on there. It might take 2 or 3 Q-tips to get this fully cleaned off. But once it's done, you can just flip over to the back Q-tip, or just grab a fresh one that's dry and just give it a nice drying. And once you're done doing that, you'll be ready to add some thermal paste. It is okay to clean up around the edges, although it's not absolutely necessary, as the edges will not be in contact with the heatsink. So it won't be absolutely crucial that gets cleaned up, although it doesn't hurt. As when you add new thermal paste, if there is any extra, that's where it'll end up going. So it probably would help to have a clean area for that overflow to run to, so that way you don't get too much gunk crammed up in there. There is, I do believe, my third cleaning with the isopropyl right there with the Q-tip. You just want to make sure you get it nice and clean as possible. Try to leave as little residue as possible on there. You don't want anything left over. It's a little, I would imagine it's probably not absolutely crucial, but I would rather stick with best practices instead of just kind of halfing it, you know. But once that's done, you can get the dry stuff, get your dry Q-tips in there and dry it all off. Then you will repeat the process for the heatsink. Well, at least I had to anyway, since this was all used equipment and very hastily disassembled and put away. So just do exactly the same thing like I'm doing here with the heatsink. Get some more of the isopropyl, the Q-tip. You could even use a washcloth if you really wanted to. Just be forewarned that the thermal paste will stain anything that it gets in contact with, so it's probably best to use like a paper towel or a Q-tip of that sort. Unless you just have a junk hand towel or washcloth you really don't care about, then by all means. But it will stick to anything that it gets the alcohol rubs off onto, and it will stick on there quite thoroughly. But if you have to, give it a good cleaning, just like I did here. Even if it is brand new, it never hurts to get it cleaned up. Sometimes they have machining oil on these anyhow, and so when they're brand spanking new, sometimes it doesn't hurt to give them a good scrub down anyways. Here I am messing around with the fan, trying to get this set up so that way I can figure out the placement of it, make sure it was lined the way I want it to be lined up. That way it wasn't sitting too high or too low, so I can get it sitting just right on the heatsink there. And I know I didn't do a very good job of keeping it in the camera, but one of the good practices I like to keep everything nice and clean and form factor. So I made sure that the power cords were run down towards the bottom, so that way they're not floating around in the case. And as you can see, what I'm doing here is I'm actually locating the CPU fan, so that way I know which way is the best to hook it up. And as you can tell, like I just mentioned, I had the cables hanging down at the bottom there. So I figured out where I was going to run it at. This is the thermal paste that I will be reapplying to the CPU. There is my spreader. You don't have to have one of these. I like using them because it makes it very much easier to spread the thermal paste to make sure you get complete coverage across your CPU. And it doesn't hurt to maybe get maybe a little less than a dime's worth of paste on there. I didn't have very much left in this tube, so I didn't add very much. But a little less than a dime's worth, actually probably less, maybe about half, about a dime's worth a size will give you a good even coat. I tried to get everything out as I could out of this tube. I had to grab I started spreading it and realized that I did not have enough, so I had to go grab another thermal tube and add some more paste on there. But once you get it all set up, get all that thermal paste on there, I like to make sure it's spread out evenly across the top of the CPU. That way, I know for a fact, and if you do this route, you'll know for a fact that there will be no bubbles that get trapped in the system. So that way, there is a gap between the CPU and the heatsink that can cause a hot spot or hot spacing in between the heatsink and your CPU that could cause it to overheat. So that's one thing you might want to be very cautious about. Oh, there we go. See, I had to add some more thermal paste because I did not have enough. Added a good little bit more there. And again, once it's all spread out, get a nice good, you don't want to go thick, but a nice thin coat, not super thin, but a thin coat covering the entire CPU is the most ideal way to do it. That way you know that everything is covered. The base plate for the heat sinks are usually spring loaded, and over time that spring load will continue to press and press and press, and it'll continue to push against that as much as possible to finish filling out the area, and then the excess will squeeze out an overflow, of course. But I don't ever want to leave it to chance and just squirt a bunch of it on there and just assume that it's going to cover the CPU completely. You want to really avoid that, especially if you have a brand new CPU that you're going to be working with. You don't want to create any of those hot spots, because that's the last thing you want to be doing is ruin one of those, right? I don't know about you, but I don't have a lot of cash to be throwing around to be buying new stuff. So, but yeah, you only need to add it to one side. Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to start with the heatsink first, that is an option. I believe that probably the best practice is to add it to the CPU, so that way you get the full footprint of it imprinted onto the base plate of the heatsink, like what I'm about to do here. I'm about ready to start fitting the heatsink on. Back out the camera a little bit, and as you can tell, there is an adjustable X plate on there, so that way this thing can fit on multiple CPU systems. And so I had to kind of open it up a little bit to try to open the footprint up to get it aligned, or what I thought was close to being aligned, to get ready to mount it on the motherboard. And then alright, like I was just saying, after you get everything aligned up, or get all the thermal paste set up on the CPU, the next thing you're going to want to do is, of course, get the heatsink mounted onto the motherboard, firmly planted, so that way the heatsink is in contact with the CPU. So there's some alignment that you got to work on, getting everything situated, getting that X bar situated properly, so that way you can get it screwed down. There is a, I don't know, I think there's a locking pin on the underside that, once mounted, will help hold everything still. There was still some movement even after I had screwed everything down. Kind of a little weird. I wasn't really sure what's going on, but it didn't go anywhere. So after I had it screwed down, it was in there and ready to go. Okay, now that I got that all figured out, we'll get down there and we'll start getting things aligned and spaced and try to get it evenly centered on top of the CPU. As you can tell, I'm ever so carefully aligning it. Trying to figure out how I want this to sit. So there's the X plate again I was talking about. Oh, and I'm trying to figure out how to get the X plate pressed down into the pin so it locks down on the mounting plate for the CPU. That shot doesn't do a whole lot better, but you can kind of see what I'm trying to do here. Trying to get it lined up so that way I can start working on screwing it in. Oh, there we go. See, so I got it into a satisfactory spot where I think it should do the best. Hopefully it won't move too much. I'll start not completely tightening them down, but tightening them down enough to the point where the springs will start adding some tension to the system. And then my fancy screwdriver I got there. I love these things. I love my electric screwdriver too. These things are so awesome to work with. But as you can tell, all the screws have got springs on them, so I'm tightening them down just enough to start adding that tension, start helping pushing the system down, just so I can make sure that everything is satisfactory to where I want it to sit before I tighten everything all the way down. So you can still see that I'm still screwing with the screws a little bit. Getting everything adjusted, and then I'll align it a little bit to get it right about where I want it at, and then this should be about the point where, oh no, I guess I didn't quite have it right where I wanted it at. So now my OCD's kicking in. Now I can't make up my mind what I want to do with it. A little bit here, a little bit over there. No, not too far. Okay, let's go back over here. I liked it where it was at. Okay, so now I feel like I got it where I like it at, and now I'm tightening the screws down all the way. And then that will lock everything down. It'll provide enough tension on the screws to provide that force to push and hold everything together. Okay, now that we got everything situated where it should be at, and hopefully won't be moving, this is the fan that we're going to be using. I had how I mentioned earlier, I was doing a little bit of a test fit on how I wanted the fan to fit on there and what direction I wanted the cable to sit. And in most cases, most people will probably agree with the way I have this set up. You want to always have the wires down and around. You don't really want anything floating. The case is laying over right now, so it wouldn't really look like it. But if you did mount it the other way around, you'd have a big old wire hanging off the side. And I know some people really don't care about that, but I really like clean, and I just way less problems to mess with. So I routed everything down and around. Then once I got that figured out, I re-looked for the CPU again, the CPU pinout, and figure out where I was going to run it. I think that little finger point I'm doing right there was probably talking about the fans that are going to be I'm going to be putting in there that I don't have the hardware for yet. The next thing we're going to be working on is putting in the power supply. Now, this isn't a big power supply for a server. I decided I was only going to hook up a few hard drives to begin with, so I wasn't really too concerned about power, as this is one of my leftover power supplies that I don't have assigned for anything yet. And here you can see that the CPU, the power supply for the CPU can be mounted upside down or right side up. So it doesn't matter which way you want to mount it. I decided to go up strictly because of the fact that this is going to be sitting in a carpet. There is a vent on the underside of that, but being that it's going to sit in the carpet, it's not really going to be able to draw fresh air in through the bottom vent into the power supply and out the back. So that's the reason why I had flipped it around so the vents were facing inside the case. So at least there was going to be a good draw of air that would be constantly coming in, opposed to having it upside down, like I had mentioned, where it'd probably be struggling to draw in fresh air because of it sitting on the carpet. Here you can tell, or you can see that I'm using my electric screwdriver again to get that thing mounted in there. Kind of fought me a little bit. Screws didn't really want to go in there, but I got them all in, and I got them hand tightened with my hand screwdriver. So if you're going to be using a lot of hard drives, you are definitely going to want to use a bigger power supply to keep everything properly running. an 800, 900, possibly 1,000 or even bigger, depending on how many hard drives you have. But like I had mentioned, I'm not going to have too many running at the moment. This was mostly just to get the system up and running. So I wasn't really too concerned that I was using a 600 watt power supply. So no biggie right there. Now that I got it all mounted in, one of the next things we're going to start working on is figuring out how we're going to run all the wires for the case and for the power supply. Like I mentioned, I love everything to look clean. So I decided I was going to run everything around the back half of the case as much as possible and utilize those power supply clips that are sitting down at the bottom. And as you can see from what I pointed out, I'm going to be using those access ports to work everything from the back around into the front and use that to plug it, and then plug everything into the motherboard from there. And there should be the CPU, the USB wires, the HDD wire, the restart wire, and the power wire that I'm all feeding in right there. Since everything for the motherboard is going to be right there, that's where all that stuff got fed through at. Everything that it needs to be plugged into is quite literally right across the right along the bottom right there. And there I am showing off the pins. I can't really see what they are off the top of my head. I know what they are, but with the viewing port that I have at the moment, I can't really see those very well. But like I just said, the HDD, the restart, and the power are those ones right there. The long black one that I didn't grab that's sitting across the back is for the USB ports. And that one right there that I was grabbing also is for a USB. Trying to remember which USB was for what. I think most of that stuff was for plug-in across the top ports. And as you can see, if I quit moving it around a little bit there, each one of those has a very specific pinout. So it means that those headers can only go to very specific pins. Some will have the first pin missing, some will have like the 5th pin missing or the 6th pin, like those ones on the bottom side have a slot filled in. So there's no way for you to accidentally plug those into the wrong port. They are specifically dedicated for certain sections or for certain ports, so that way you can't plug in your USB into, I don't know, like the power header and, kill your system or just have nothing happen, right? So when you're putting this stuff together, there's no way you can mess it up. And I'm here. You can see me right now. I'm test fitting. That is a piggyback set right there that plugs right in off that. Not 100% sure what I needed that for. I just decided to fiddle around with it around back. So I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to lay it out. So I'm kind of test fitting everything right now so I can figure out what goes where and why. And then once I get that all figured out, then I'll start going through the process of actually properly running everything through the back and pulling it up forward through the front through those little access ports to try to make everything look as clean as possible. And here I am trying to get a nice good close-up of the header pin setup so I can figure out what wires go to what sections. Most motherboards will have a pinout of what wires need to go where for what plugins. They'll have them right down in the bottom corner. And I did a really good job right here. I forgot to move the camera so you could see what I was doing. Doing a real good job. But down there at the very bottom corner, there is a little diagram on the motherboard that tells you what pins are for what plugin. So for the HDD light, that tells you that the computer's processing or thinking. The reset button and the power button, everything is diagrammed down there. And as you can see, I'm getting my face in there, trying to figure out what's what so I can start plugging everything in. And making sure that everything's going to its proper location as far as the plugins are concerned. And then, as you can tell, somewhat, that I'm kind of tucking the wires back in place because I'm still messing around with things a little bit, still trying to figure out where I want things to go. And as you can tell, I just unplugged that USB cable because I suddenly decided, you know what, it might look a little better if I actually ran it across the back instead of across the front. So now that I've decided what I want to do and how I want to do it, everything is going to start getting a little more finalized, a little more cleaned up, and then see, as you can tell, that looks so much better running it across the back instead of running across the front. So then you don't have to worry about huge bundles of wires sitting all over the place, right? So everything is run in the back, and see, okay, there we go. Now I remember to move the camera. But see there, so now you can see it. Everything's run across the back now instead of everything bundled up in the front. So it gives it a very clean look, very sleek, very organized, very purposely built system. I love that when you're when you're putting these kind of things together. One of the other things I really like to do while I'm building my computers is to make sure that all the looms that are coming off the power supply, well, any of the wires in general, are not all twisted up and all ratted up in knots. So one of the things I really like to do is to make sure everything's straightened up before I start tucking them all away. Oh, so here we go into the next section. Now we're going to start running the power. That is the 20 pin. That's the main power connector for the motherboard. I do believe that's the 20 pin. Yeah, that's the 20 pin. Some motherboards will have a 20 pin plus 4 pin that can click together and make a 24 pin head out. But on this one, it only needs the 20 pin, so I never bothered to run that. As you can tell, as I'm still fiddling around with this a little bit, trying to figure out some cable management. I think I decided not to do anything with that because that's such a massive bundle of wires, and there's not really a lot you can do with it. I do believe I think I decided to zip tie that up into the case per those little holes that were next to it just to hold it in. There is the remote power pin, the secondary plug-ins. Here, I'm trying to look for that 4 and 4 pin setup while doing a little bit more untangling. It's kind of funny how quickly these things become a mess on you. But after I get those straightened out a little bit, I got them pulled out and got them ready to start working on it. And I'm trying to pin them together because there's a little they click them together to turn them into an 8 pin. So I found the wires and I clicked them together. I do believe that's what I'm doing right here. So I clicked them together, and I think I started to decide where I'm going to go with all these wires. Okay, so there's some of my OCD kicking in again. I'm trying to clean some stuff up. So there you go. So you can tell right there, that's the 4 and 4. Yeah, and unfortunately I didn't do a very good job on this camera scene, so you'll see them again here in a second. But yeah, I'm trying to mess around with them to get them ready. So I am now running the power supply up out the back side and running it up through the top to see if it'll actually fit up that way. I wasn't exactly too sure if I was going to be able to make it fit because the access ports up on the top were a lot smaller than the access ports that were down at the bottom. So I pop apart the pin, so it's no longer an 8 count. So now I popped it apart, so it's back to the 4 plus 4 count to try to make it a little more maneuverable, so I can try to stuff it through the hole back there to try to pull it through. Because I had realized that it pinned together as an 8 pin was going to be a little too big for it to fit back there. I'm still, at this moment in time, I wasn't exactly too sure that if I was going to be able to figure this out or not. So I thought it was going to be a really cool idea to run it around the back. You can now see the pins starting to come through. I'm getting a little excited here. I know I was excited here. I got really excited about this because I was pretty thrilled I was able to get those up there. And there they are. I got them through the access port up there on the top back side. I know I had a good laugh on that one because I was like, yes, it worked. All right. So now I'm trying to feed a little bit of extra wire through there so that way I can have a little more maneuvering room. Trying to still feed them a little bit. It took me a hot second to get it out up and through there. I edited a lot of it out because it did take me a few minutes to get this working. So yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't paying very much attention to what I was doing right here because I now realize I was standing in front of the camera quite a bit, but This is about the best of what I can get a hold of, because this took several minutes to do, and I ended up editing out a considerable amount of the footage that I had recorded. But as you can tell there, I did get it through the access port there, and I can tell you what, I was very excited when I got that through there. And then the tricky little part here, actually I figured this part out actually a lot faster than I thought I was going to, is because that access port is so close to where those pins need to be at. Was trying to fold the wires in such a way that they kind of piggybacked on themselves. Oh yeah, see, there you go. Prime example as I was talking about, those little pins that click together to turn it into an 8-pin. But now that I got it clipped back together, I was trying to figure out how to twist the wires around, because the clip, the locking part needed to be on the top side. So in order to piggyback it, I had to feed it starting upside down. And we get it clicked in, and then we'll tuck the excess wire back in there. See if it's going to get done or not. Wow, I did a really good job of getting in front of the camera. Okay, so I think I figured that that's probably where I'm going to sit at with that. But I was quite enthusiastic about that and managing to get that tucked up in there. Okay, so thank you for viewing my video. Again, I was being a real genius about this, and I had forgot to turn on my mic when I was recording this originally, so I have had to dub the entire process. You'll have to excuse me about my the way I went about it. I was trying to figure out what I was talking about, and I know I didn't fill in on everything that I was talking about. But if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. If you would not mind, please liking and subscribing to my channel. I would very much appreciate it. This will conclude episode 2, as it's already almost a half an hour long. This was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. I still had more content I wanted to put on this video, but I didn't want to make this too overwhelmingly long. So unfortunately, this was probably going to end up being a 4-part series. But again, I thank you for watching this. I appreciate it, and I cannot wait to see you in the next episode.